The novel A Pair of Aces reimagines the takedown of the most powerful crime boss in 1930s New York, the trailblazing prosecutor who came up with the case.
I scribbled down every name she whispered, every role she mapped out. As I made notes, I prayed these were the men who would form a strong chain of evidence reaching to the top.
Teams up with a notorious madam.
If you would have told me that I'd be shimmying out the back of a chock full of nuts to willingly meet a prosecutor in an alley, I would have bet $1,000 at my mahjong table on no.
Against the mob.
Charles Lucky Luciano. He is the new target of our investigation.
Best-selling authors Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray immerse readers in a story of power, family, and unlikely alliances. A Pair of Aces is the Club Calvi Reader's Choice. Hi, I'm Mary Calvi, and we've been looking forward to this meetup with Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray for weeks. We've featured books that they both wrote separately, and now A Pair of Aces is the third book they've written together. The fascinating story made it another bestseller. We got together with some of our readers to talk about the trailblazing women at the center of the book. And Danielle, you're going to share some of the questions and comments from those readers. Had they ever heard of these women before?
Mary, no, they didn't know about them. But like all good historical fiction, what A Pair of Aces did is that it had people in our group taking a deep dive into web searches to find out more about Eunice Carter. She was the first female Black prosecutor in Manhattan, and about Polly Adler. She was an infamous Manhattan madam.
They had the same goal, and they were able to form a partnership without becoming friends. And I thought that that was a really important line to not cross, and they held to that.
They had their own code of conduct.
To have these two strong women who had so much against them because of either being an immigrant or being, I'm going to say, a Black female.
I was really impressed with the Polly character, only because she's a madam and she was not portrayed in a negative light.
It was so unbelievable what Eunice was able to achieve, because a woman in that day and age was able to convince Thomas Dewey to let her go forward with the strategy she created. And I just thought it was completely amazing.
And it was amazing. You know, Thomas Dewey, of course, was that legendary prosecutor who argued the case, the one that Eunice Carter built in court. And what's also amazing is that Eunice and Polly were strategizing while each also faced big issues, Mary, at home with their families.
That was very complicated, and these were complex women. Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray, thank you for bringing them to light. It's so nice to speak with both of you. I just dove into this story and I just couldn't put it down. All of your books bring us stories of forgotten women in history. And in this one, I honestly, Victoria, was worried and fearing for their lives every turn.
As you were reading it.
Oh, my goodness. I was terrified. Oh, my goodness. Are they going to make it for another day?
And that's how it really probably was for them. You know, we know from Eunice Carter's biography that was written by her grandson that the mob was really after them. And even in Thomas Dewey's autobiography, there were crazy things that the mob did trying to scare them away.
I mean, I was wondering, honestly, whether that bravery and that courage she had, I mean, it was just had to be so intense, so extreme. I think she probably had the most dangerous job in America at the time.
At the time, you would think so. But she was fearless, like all the other women in that story.
Any corner she turned, honestly, could have been her last.
That's right.
I mean, you were telling us about her moments walking home.
Yes.
I was like, please let her make it home. She's got her husband, she's got her son.
Yeah.
I mean, we're really worried for her. How do you think she had that fearlessness? I mean, what is it that brought her to that point to be able to say, I can take down the top crime boss?
I think it was in Eunice's DNA. she came from parents who were activists, who would go into the deep South to set up NAACP offices. And so it was just something she'd seen all her life. And I also think she felt some responsibility to be the first. She knew she was going to be the first in several things, and she felt some responsibility to leave some kind of legacy.
I mean, it was really quite incredible to think she was the first. We're talking about 1930s.
Yes.
I mean, not only is she dealing with crime and the fear for her own life, but also not difficult to maneuver through that prosecutor's office, I would imagine.
That's right, not at all. And you know, Marie was a litigator, was an attorney, and she always talks about how it's so difficult to be the only woman in the room. But can you imagine in 1930?
It is difficult to imagine. And Marie, having that experience as a litigator, I'm sure must have been so essential in being able to tell this woman's story.
Yeah, I really found that it conjured up a lot of my own experiences as a young female litigator in New York City, where, you know, this was several decades ago. So often I was the only woman in the room. But, you know, Eunice was much more of a pioneer than I was. You know, she was not only the only woman, she was the only Black woman. And she was the only Black woman in a world that was very much white male dominated. And she was trying to really put forth a case that she kind of knew was going to be successful, but she was trying to do it kind of against her boss, Thomas Dewey's wishes. You know, she had created this really original, brilliant case in which she was able to prove mob infiltration of prostitution. And her boss, Thomas Dewey, who was terrific in so many other ways, was really not that interested in bringing that sort of case. So she was not only, you know, up against the mob in terms of bringing a case, but she was also had to really advocate for herself in this work environment that was not super interested in her theories initially.
Yeah, you make a good point, Marie. I mean, that idea of taking down prostitution rings, it was not all that popular, and not just in the 1930s. I mean, we're talking generations before prostitution rings were taken down.
Exactly. I mean, this was really an unprecedented case. Up until this point, the only success prosecutors had had in bringing down the mob at all was really with tax evasion. So Thomas Dewey wanted to utilize some of these other rackets, ones that, you know, were probably more male in his mind, you know, loan sharking and gambling. This was an era when there was actually a court system in New York City called the Women's Court, where there were certain crimes and issues that were considered exclusively female, like prostitution, like custody issues. So there was really a lot of negativity around a case that was built against crimes involving women. So, you know, Eunice was really a pioneer in so many different ways. And that was one of the reasons we really felt like she would be the perfect one half of our unlikely pair.
Yeah, and there's another person in this pairing, and that is Polly Adler, a madam in New York in the 1930s, pairing with a prosecutor. I mean, who would think? What a great team for a story.
But you know, Eunice had to have someone on the inside help her build that case because she knew too much. She knew who to speak with. She knew who was the different players. There's only one way she would have been able to build that case, and it would have been with someone on the inside.
And Marie, having the experience as a litigator, I'm wondering if having somebody on the inside is essential in these cases.
Yeah, I mean, as I kind of looked at this story through a litigator's eyes and sort of tried to imagine the way in which Eunice would have to build these evidentiary chains that would hold up in court, it seemed kind of essential that she would have somebody on the inside guiding her. Not that that detracted from the incredible brilliance of her original idea here, you know, to build this case on mob infiltration of prostitution, but to have somebody guide her, point her in the right direction for witnesses, wiretapping, documentation, the sorts of things that she would need. So, you know, when we thought about that and then took a look at of course, we don't know who or what that person would be. Their identity would have had to have been shielded. Polly Adler sort of jumped out as a person who may have been a possible pairing, but also somebody whose story in and of itself was so powerful. You know, Victoria and I were interested in this book as we set out and exploring the idea that one of your readers mentioned, which I just loved, that two people from such different backgrounds could come together to effectuate great change, right? It didn't matter that they were friends. It didn't matter that they were aligned in every way, but they had this one commonality, this one desire for common good. And Polly Adler, with her unique story and her unique goal, would have really embodied that. So she was kind of the obvious choice for that other half of the unlikely pair.
Was fighting for justice for her women, and Eunice was fighting for justice for an entire city.
Exactly.
We're going to go to Daniel Parker to hear what readers have to say. They were really interested in this.
They were totally interested, and I love that, how they were fighting for justice. I love that. So we talked about in our readers meetup about the stories of these successful women who had an impact on society and how easily they can be lost to history. So we mentioned that this is the third book by Marie and Victoria that has given a wider exposure to these forgotten stories. So Joe wants to know about the spark that sets Marie and Victoria off on these bookish adventures.
How do you find stories like this? It's just fascinating to me that these stories are out there. And I wasn't aware of this at all. And a lot of the references in the book I recognized from other books I've read. And it's just amazing that they find these people to base a story on. And it's just fascinating to me. Where do you start?
Doesn't Joe have just a perfect question?
That's a perfect
I mean,
question.
so tell me about that spark.
Well, you know, I always say that Marie is the treasure hunter in this partnership because that's what she always wanted to do. So Marie would be great to answer this question.
All right, Marie, it's on you. How do you find this?
Yeah.
Where's the spark?
Yeah, I mean, I've written many books actually about these historic women who've left us important legacies. And you really find these women in a variety of places. It's all about the lens through which you're looking for them. Once you start to envision them, once you start to see these women, you literally find them everywhere. They're waiting for us to discover them. In this particular instance, you know, it sort of all started with this theme that Victoria and I had of an unlikely partnership, people who were different coming together. And I keep a running list of incredible historical women whose stories really deserve to be told. And Eunice Carter has been on that list for a while. You know, I knew of her from my days as a New York City lawyer. I knew she was the first Black female prosecutor. And to be honest, I'd kind of shied away from her and her history because I wasn't eager to relive my days as a lawyer. I was always a history lover, and I kind of became an inadvertent lawyer. But when I dug down a little deeper into her story and realized that she was really the impetus for this world-changing case, we were intrigued. And that was really the beginning of it. And then, as I mentioned earlier, looking for that person on the inside was the way in which we kind of brought these two women together. But honestly, once you're looking for these women, you will find them everywhere.
Victoria, how did you feel when you heard about this possibility of Eunice Carter?
It was amazing because I'd never heard of her. At least Marie had heard of Eunice. So I started on Google. Google is not how you do research, you know that. But I just went to Google and put in her name, and the first thing that came up about her was the Mob Museum. And I said, okay, that's interesting. They give honor to her, but I had never heard of her. And that was the point that really fascinated me.
What a moment for you.
That was really amazing. The mob was like, look, she took down our big boy, so we have to give her some honor.
All right, so tell me then, how does this team work over and over so successfully? Victoria and Marie, I need to understand. I mean, do one of you have veto power? I mean, who's in charge here? Who's
That
the
is
boss?
so interesting because I don't think nobody's ever asked that question about veto power at all. And neither one of us do, but we work like sisters. It's really like a hand in glove. And every book on the collaboration is different. Marie is the treasure hunter, and she comes back with all these ideas, and depending on the theme that we've talked about, and then we say, oh, this is good, and why this would work. And then we spend months just kind of having little conversations, talking it out, and then we'll outline it together. And recently we've been working on books that have 2 characters. And so while we try to research, both of us research the whole thing, one of us will take one primary character, the other one the other, and then we write a first draft, but we write from one document. So we can see each other working through it, but we have the outline, so we know what's gonna come up. And then after the first draft is done, we really work on every word of the book together.
What a beautiful partnership.
It's really great.
Okay, so in this story now, I need to know whose character, who took which character.
I did take Eunice.
You took Eunice.
And you know, in another book, I had wanted to take Eleanor Roosevelt and have Marie take Mary McLeod Bethune. It would have worked because both of us, the way we were working with each other with those books, but sometimes there are little nuances in race that we felt, you know what, we're working on the whole book together anyway, but the first draft is done by me with the Black character and Marie with the white character.
Marie, so you had the madam, and you gave us some real details about her life. So what was this research like for you?
Well, I will say Victoria and I did have to visit some historic speakeasies and bars to get a feel for the time period, right? You know, I will say that one of the greatest pieces of research in kind of creating the Polly character was her autobiography. You know, she left us, and that's always a gift when you're dealing with a historical character and you're looking for original source material, if they've left you behind their story in their own words. Now, you have to approach it with a grain of salt because they have their own agenda in telling kind of their life's history. But you got an incredible sense of Polly's voice, her story, her history, the struggles she dealt with. But there was one glaring omission in the autobiography, and that was for her own safety. Victoria and I think she absolutely decried all knowledge of the mob infiltration of prostitution, which of course could not possibly be true, but she needed to stay safe. So, but I would say that really allowed me and us kind of a really unique insight into who Polly was and what her world was like. Now, I will say, I wish her house still existed. It was a 2-story, almost more like a private club than anything else, 2-story establishment in an exclusive building in the Upper West Side of Manhattan that still exists today. The first floor was a bar that was kitted out to look like King Tut's tomb, and I would have loved to have gotten a glimpse of that.
Yeah, I mean, all of it was fascinating. The secret door, I love that too. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with much more right after this. We are talking to the authors of our Reader's Choice Pair of Aces. And Danielle, I know you have some more questions from readers for the authors.
So many questions, but we were trying to break down how all the pieces of this book came together. You mentioned and talked to Marie and Victoria about how they got all the information together, because there were so many different spheres. They involved work, family, New York City, all at the same time. So here's Susan's question.
This book was very, very complex, and there were so many facts that they would have had to research. Yeah. And they were so different, right? The world of Polly was so different than the world of Eunice. And then there was the Luciano and the mob scene. I think it would have been a tremendous undertaking for one person. So I think something like this was really good that they had the 2 of them to work together on this. I'd like to know how long it took them to write the book.
How long did it take, Victoria?
Yeah, it takes us usually from the beginning, to the end, a little over 2 years, because it's the research and the reading and then the writing and then the editing and the re-editing, as you know, it just takes a long time. So about 2 years, but we spend a lot of time on research. And sometimes the research will come in the middle of it, like you'll have to stop and read a book or try to read a book while you're writing. But that's a very important part of the writing for us.
Yeah, that's such a good point that you make, because people think, okay, you do the research and now we're on to writing. But it's really kind of throughout the whole process,
Throughout
right?
the whole process, because sometimes you don't know what you don't know until you don't know it. So the research is very broad in the beginning, but then as you're writing, it has to get specific. Like, where was the house exactly? And what kinds of things did they wear during that time period?
I mean, you went down to like what types of shoes she had on. I know, Marie, that Polly was recognizing the type of shoe from the heels stepped at one point. That was fascinating. And actually, it sounded like a really good-looking shoe, right? It was an Oxford heel, wasn't it? I would like a pair of those, actually.
Me too.
So were you down to, when you're getting down to the nitty-gritty, I mean, you're talking about fashion, too. I mean, what types of clothing she was wearing. And it was very specific when we talked about the prosecutor's clothing to make sure she was business and you knew she was serious, too. Marie?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that are important in creating this very believable historic world for your character to inhabit. You know, it could be the shoes, it could be the clothes, it could be the food, it could be the wallpaper. I mean, so many small nuances really bring that story alive. And as Victoria said, sometimes you don't know the answers to those until you're in the scene and you realize, if you're looking at the scene through your character's eyes, what would they be observing? What would they be hearing? What would they be smelling? So that's just like, you know, one part of the research. There's bigger pieces that involve things like what's going on in the country overall, politically, culturally, socially. So you really do need to know all the different layers so that your reader really feels immersed in that world.
And speaking of the readers who were completely immersed in this book, we want to check back with them because they have a few more questions for us. Danielle?
Yeah, and this question actually ties to what was going on in the world during this time. So as the first Black female prosecutor in New York, Eunice was under a type of pressure that her white male counterparts did not experience. Her race would become a factor in the case. How? You got to read the book. She had a demanding job, but while she was also still being a wife and mother in the 1930s. But Bibi wondered if Eunice took it too far.
Did you consciously write that her marriage is going to take a back seat to this trial? And if Eunice was a male, that was my second piece. If Eunice was a male and did the same thing, would our emotional thoughts about, oh my goodness, I can't believe she's putting her family at risk, would that be the same?
Really interesting question,
very
Victoria.
good question. You know, some things don't change, right? I mean, it is the same thing today where a woman has to balance work and family. And she asked whether or not we did this consciously. Yes, because from the biography, we found out that she put her career, and some people would say ahead of her marriage. That's not, I don't think that's what she thought she was doing. Her husband was a very successful dentist. Was he putting his career ahead of her? I think she just thought, I have a career, I have a husband, I have a child, and I'm going to try to balance and do what's best for all three.
It comes to a point, though, that she is very concerned for her child's life.
Yes, yes, and sent him away.
You wonder what else she must have been going through. I mean, because you're talking about the pressures to be a mother, but also her community, it felt like, wanted her to be this socialite.
They wanted the socialite. They didn't, there was no need for her to go out there and to be an attorney. We are talking 1930s where women didn't work. Their role was in the home. And especially when you had a successful husband, you came from this legacy of your parents, there was no need to go out there and try to be bigger than your husband or bigger than you needed to be. So she had a pressure from everywhere.
Everywhere. And, you know, the pressure on the two of you, because you're always under deadline. So I'm wondering, how do you cope with that? I mean, there is a lot. I'm sure when the calendar is moving closer to when the book has to be submitted, Marie. I mean, tell us a little bit about that, and how do you make that work?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you feel a little bit like Eunice Carter. I mean, I would definitely say you definitely are. And I think that's one of the reasons we were attracted to highlighting that aspect of her character. And of course, just to know, this is our fictional interpretation of Eunice Carter, right? We don't really know how she felt about that balance. But when you're looking at what she's struggling with, we like to highlight issues that are both historic and modern. And that's one, especially the life stage I'm in, right? I have a family, I still have children at home, and you have your career and you're trying to balance, and you can really, and Victoria has been there too, you can really feel that pressure that Eunice would feel, and how to juggle it. And so I think sometimes we have to kind of go through the same process that Eunice did, and we do. How do you serve what you're called to do, while at the same time making sure that all the needs of your family and the other loved ones in your life are met? And I think your reader raised a great question. Would we have felt differently about those choices if Eunice had been a male character? And I think the reality is, she was one of 20 prosecutors in that office. She was the only woman, only Black person. I'm sure no one would have ever even asked those other prosecutors that question or thought about it at all when they were spending night after night in the office and the wife was coming to the office and delivering meals to them. It was just assumed that what they were doing was important and that it should take precedence. And so Eunice didn't have the luxury of that. She still had to juggle all those other forces that were pulling on her.
Honestly,
just
I
like
felt
we do
such
today.
An immense amount of pride for her accomplishment. I wonder, Victoria, for you, as you're doing the research, are you going, way to go? I mean, amazing.
Yes, I think we both do, for both of the women. Because, you wouldn't think you're rooting for the madam, one of the most notorious madams, but she ran her brothel. Polly ran her brothel so differently. She ran it like a business. And she did that to protect the girls. And so there was some kind of sympathy and empathy we had to have for Polly as well. But I was rooting for both of the women, both of them.
Not an easy task that either of them have. We do have one last question. So, Danielle, let's get to you.
Okay, so we ask our previous Reader's Choice author to record a question for the next author. So our previous book was Livonia Chow Mein, and here's author Abigail Savage-Liu.
Marie and Victoria, congratulations. I'm curious how your writing process and collaboration process has evolved over the course of 3 books.
That's a very good question. Very good question, right? It has changed because I had done collaborations before our first novel, The Personal Librarian, and Marie had not. And Marie is an attorney by trade, so she wanted to know all the flow charts and the steps. And I think what has evolved with Marie and us is that every book is different. It really is a partnership now, so we don't even sit down and try to figure out how it's going to go. It just goes. And we're just both in this car with our foot on the accelerator, and it just goes. Marie's car goes faster than my car. Just a little, she writes a little bit faster than me. But wouldn't you agree, Marie, that it just goes now?
Yeah, there's certain things that we've become kind of accustomed to doing kind of synergistically together, right? How we're going to approach the story, a little bit about the process. Again, what I've learned so much from Victoria is that with a collaboration, because every story is different, every kind of process has to be a little bit different, right? Your research is going to be different. The relationship between the women is going to be different. And so you have to stay flexible and nimble for that. As my lawyer self wants, I like everything to be super organized and flow charted. And yeah, we can still do that. But you do have to keep the door open for where the character and characters might take you, which might be someplace expected and far better than you could have envisioned at the start.
Well, it's been great speaking with the both of you and reading your book. It was just pure joy to be with you again. Thank you. Thank you. And we will be back with much more right after this.
Thanks so much.
Danielle, we always have such great conversations with Marie and Victoria, and now we're hearing the breaking news that a fourth collaboration is in the works, so we just cannot wait to read that.
Can't wait.
In the meantime, Club Calvi has a new read for August. We just announced that the readers have chosen With Friends Like You by Amy Chozick. It was voted in as the new reader's choice.
That's right, and this is her debut novel. She described it as a psychological thriller about a new mom in Manhattan named Emily. She's lost and lonely, and Emily decides that the answer to all of her problems is reconnecting with her former best friend Daisy, who disappeared 15 years ago.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she becomes obsessed with finding this roommate. And the author says Emily just kind of falls into this dark rabbit hole trying to find her. And there's so many secrets that are unveiled. You can click on clubcalvi.com and read a free excerpt and get the book, too.
That's right. And please join our Facebook group so that you can participate in our book discussions. You can be part of our virtual meetups. All you have to do is scan the QR code on your screen to get sent directly to our page. We also have the info on clubcalvi.com.
We can't wait to dive in. We'll see you soon for our next meetup.